When did Kobe get there?
Kobe came probably after my third year.
Third year.
After my third year, they traded Vlade for Kobe. And shit, only motherfucker that knew about Kobe at that time was Eddie, because Eddie went to Temple.
Right.
Eddie used to be like, that motherfucker Kobe. Like Eddie used to tell us, he said, that little motherfucker gonna be Kobe.
Yeah.
You know, Eddie always said that little motherfucker gonna be Kobe. He always said that. And when Kobe got there, it was funny because at that time it was during the And One era. You know what I'm saying? The mixtapes and all that shit.
And who's the GOAT?
See, that's the type of immature question.
Yeah,
No, it's not.
exactly.
It's who's the GOAT. I'm the regular sports fan. This is what we talk about.
I know, this is what regular fans talk about. I get it.
You don't. So you're saying you're the GOAT?
You've done it 4 times, KD. Does it get old?
Nah, it doesn't. I'm gonna start hitting the clay, walking around with my fours.
Start bench cut. Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, LeBron James.
No, I refuse to answer that one.
You can't plead the fifth.
I will start all 3 of them. And
The Lakers weren't prepared for the day a teenager walked into the locker room and acted like he had already survived 10 All-Star games and 3 playoff wars. Veterans expected a quiet rookie, maybe a few mistakes, maybe some humility. Instead, they got a 17-year-old treating every practice like a personal courtroom where everybody was either a witness or a target. Nick Van Exel quickly realized something was off because the confidence wasn't normal, and neither was how fast it started turning into problems nobody could ignore.
What are your memories of playing against Kobe? To what extent did you consider him a rival?
I was a big Kobe fan, even while we played against each other. Felt like how he approached the game. To me, he was the complete package. You know, he had the killer instinct, he had the athleticism, he had the skill level. He embodied everything that you need to be a dominant force.
Kobe took it upon and added the 3-ball to his game because that's where the game evolved to. But skill-wise, the moves, the footwork, he had it all.
MJ and Kobe, 1-on-1. Who you taking?
I'm putting my...
It always starts with the strange silence that follows when a teenager walks into a locker room full of grown men who already believe they understand how the league works, because nothing about that moment looks like history at first. And yet everyone who was there later remembers it like the beginning of a shift they could not quite explain while it was happening.
Iverson said he had Kobe at 2, and Stephen A. challenged that. What makes Kobe special in players' mind, in a player's mind himself? We don't go by your stats. We don't go by the accolades. We go by how the person played, what was his attributes, right? So when you think about the greatest players of all time, 90, 80% of them have God gift, natural talent, ability, body. Jordan, 48-inch vertical. You got the big hand.
Nick Van Exel would later look back on those early Lakers years with the kind of clarity that only comes after time has softened the edges. And what stands out in his recollection is not just the talent that arrived, but the way it arrived, with a kind of certainty that did not ask for permission from anyone in the room.
You know what the 24 stand for. People don't even understand that was a sign to everybody that he was a step above 23, if y'all even got that.
That's why he went with 24?
That's why he went 24, and that was a shot at Mike.
Kobe Bryant did not enter the league as someone trying to figure out where he belonged, but rather as someone who already believed he had a place reserved, even if the rest of the roster had not yet been informed.
Hot sauce.
Yeah, Kobe was 6'7", and you know back then, 6'7" cats, the handles weren't all that great. That's the edge I give today's era versus the 90s era when you talk about just being able to handle the rock. You know, when they talk about skills and shit like that. I don't think the IQ now is better than the 90s era, but skill-wise, I'll give them that. You know what I'm saying?
I agree.
Kobe, that nigga always used to say, dog, that nigga, I'm the best one-on-one player.
To be around special dudes, because I was around when Kobe was 36, I was 23. We played 2012 together.
At that time, the Lakers were still shaping themselves, still adjusting pieces and identities. And the move that sent Vlade Divac out in exchange for a draft pick that became Kobe was not treated like a cultural earthquake at the moment. It was just another transaction in a league constantly rearranging itself. Yet inside the building, there was already at least one voice quietly insisting that something different had just happened. Eddie Jones, who came out of Temple and carried a reputation for reading talent early, had already been telling teammates that the young guard coming through was going to be special. speaking about him with a level of certainty that sounded exaggerated to anyone who had not yet seen him up close. When Kobe finally arrived, the timing placed him right in the middle of an era defined by playground influence meeting professional structure, a period when the "and one" mixtape culture had blurred the line between showmanship and skill, and guards like Rafer Skip to My Lou Alston had made streetball creativity feel like a parallel league of its own. Kobe, however, was not trying to blend into that aesthetic. He observed it, absorbed parts of it, but never belonged to it, because even as a teenager, he carried himself like someone trying to solve a much larger problem than simply entertaining a crowd. There was also something unusual about the way he approached skill for his size. At around 6 feet 6 inches or 6 feet 7 inches, he moved with a guard's curiosity, but did not yet have the polished handle that would later become part of his identity. In that era, players that tall were not expected to manipulate the ball with finesse, and that expectation created a natural separation between positions. Yet Kobe seemed uninterested in that separation, as if the traditional categories of the game were suggestions rather than rules.
How much did it mean to you that Kobe picked up on your babyface assassin nickname? You know, it seems like he saw the killer instinct in you before a lot of others.
That is one of my favorite memories and compliments I've ever gotten in my life. It was my rookie year, and we were playing the Lakers at home, and he's on the bench. I think we're getting beat at the time, but I come down the court and I do this little pump fake situation, hit a leaner off the glass, and as I run out on the court, the camera locks in on him for some reason, and he points to or leans to the guy sitting next to him on his team.
Veterans around him noticed quickly that confidence was not something he had to develop, because it already existed in full form from day one. He would openly declare himself one of the best one-on-one players in the league, even as an 18-year-old rookie, and the statement was not delivered as a joke or a hope. It was stated with the kind of calm certainty that forces people to decide whether they are listening to arrogance or early evidence of something real. Around him, that distinction began to blur. Inside practices, that mindset turned into a daily collision. The Lakers already had established wing players who understood their roles within a team that was trying to become a contender, and Kobe entered that structure with a completely different internal operating system. He was not focused on hierarchy in the way veterans expected, because his instinct was to challenge whoever stood in front of Excel. And others from that group would later describe how those early practices often turned into extended battles of isolation basketball, where Kobe would repeatedly seek out matchups against Eddie Jones, Anthony Peeler, and Cedric Ceballos, players who already occupied established roles on the wing. From a team perspective, the goal was preparation for winning games, but Kobe's internal goal was something more personal and relentless.
Straight up, I'm better than you, and really stood on it. And if you look at every goal or every record that Mike Jordan has had, Kobe.
We was playing them when I was in Denver, and Kenyon started guarding, and Kenyon was saying to him and he wasn't doing anything. Kenyon was like, you put on your sneakers like I put on mine. You put on your uniform like I put on. I'm scared of you, man. I beat your going crazy with him.
He was not trying to simply contribute. He was trying to take something, or at least prove that nothing was permanently assigned. What made it even more complicated for the veterans was that the team itself was still learning how to win at a championship level. There was structure, there was talent, and there was ambition, but cohesion at the highest level still required time. Kobe, on the other hand, behaved as if time was not part of his equation. He approached every possession like a direct argument with the defender in front of him, as if each one was an opportunity to establish a ranking that would be remembered later. That mentality naturally created friction, although not always the kind that led to conflict. Much of it was competitive tension rather than hostility, because even the veterans could see that the energy coming from the area, from the perspective of experienced players in that locker room, there was a clear understanding that winning at the highest level required more than individual excellence. It required restraint, timing, and a sense of collective rhythm that often took younger players years to fully appreciate. Kobe, however, was still in the phase where individual dominance felt like the most honest expression of basketball. He wanted possessions, he wanted matchups, and he wanted responsibility in a way that sometimes exceeded what the team could structurally absorb at that stage.
Shaquille O'Neal in Magic 6'9" point guard with vision. Kobe, standard. If I give you every 6'6" guard in the NBA and NBA history, you would never find him. You would never find Kobe because he didn't have big hands. He wasn't quick. He wasn't fast. 38-inch vertical, that's standard. And what he did with that body, it's like you took a S500 and he was pushing it like a Bugatti. That's what we look at. We look at the normal person fighting.
MJ was doing, he learned from David Thompson and Jerry and those guys. Stuff that I've done, I've learned from.
This tension did not break him, but it did test him. The league responded to him early with the kind of physical and psychological pressure that every young star eventually faces. And one of the most widely remembered moments came when he struggled in the playoffs against Utah, missing a series of crucial shots that became part of the early narrative around his career. For many young players, that kind of public failure becomes a psychological setback. For Kobe, it became material. When the Lakers returned home after that experience, the reaction was not avoidance, but acceleration. He went back into the gym with a level of intensity that teammates later described as difficult to match, even among professionals who had already built careers on discipline. It was not simply about shooting more, but about refining every possible detail, from footwork to angles to repetition under fatigue. The mindset was not framed as revenge against critics. He expanded into work. Veterans around him noticed that the work ethic was not comparable to most players they had encountered. Nick Van Exel, who had played alongside elite professionals, would later reflect that Kobe's approach to training was in a category of its own. Not just in terms of effort, but in terms of consistency and obsession with repetition.
Games and just treated me really well, and I think there was some mutual respect there. So I was a big fan.
Where does he rank for you?
I mean, I'm a Jordan guy, but to me, he's the closest thing we ever gotten to see to MJ. It's just the way he played, the same grit, the same killer instinct. So to me, he's right there with MJ.
The most skilled player I've ever seen is Kobe.
More than MJ?
The most skilled basketball player I ever seen is Kobe Bean Bryant. Kobe took who MJ was, but enhanced the skill set, had a better handle. MJ didn't shoot three.
Players like Dirk Nowitzki and Manu Ginobili, who were themselves known for elite preparation, still stood within a different rhythm compared to the sheer volume and intensity Kobe applied to his development. The most striking examples came after regular practice sessions had already ended, when most players had left the facility and the building had begun to settle into silence. Kobe would often remain behind, turning empty courts into personal laboratories. In those moments, he would engage in structured one-on-one sessions against practice players and big men who were asked to defend without running offensive sets, creating situations where the entire focus was on his ability to score under controlled resistance. Players such as Sean Rooks, Eldon Campbell, and Corey Blunt would rotate into these sessions, and the structure was simple but relentless. If Kobe scored, he earned a point. If he missed, the defender earned a point. The game continued until a conclusion was forced, and what made it memorable was not just the scoring. The idea of him being unstoppable was not used lightly in those circles, but it was also not misunderstood. It did not mean he never missed shots or never struggled.
Because he been quiet. Man, this man started going crazy. I mean, dunks, threes, mid-range. I mean, killing it. I think he had like 49 or something.
49 points. What off his playoff?
And somebody was shooting a free throw. And my nickname is Chuck.
Yeah, man.
He was like, Chuck. He said I was chilling. And they shook the tree and the mamba fell out. And I was like, shh, leave him alone. And that was like my fondest moment.
It meant that his response to failure was immediate continuation rather than hesitation. Every miss became part of the process rather than a stopping point, and that is what separated him from many young players who experienced early setbacks and adjusted their ambition accordingly. As his career progressed, that foundation only became more visible. The same teenager who once insisted on challenging established veterans eventually became one of the central figures in a championship core. And the early clashes that once seemed like friction gradually transformed into the kind of internal competition that championship teams often require. What once looked like impatience revealed itself as preparation compressed into a shorter timeline than most people were comfortable with. Looking back, Nick Van Exel and others from that era often return to the same realization, which is that greatness does not always announce itself in the form of immediate harmony. Sometimes it enters as disruption, as stubborn confidence, and as a refusal to accept the normal pace of development. In Kobe's case, all of those traits existed simultaneously, and while they did not always make life easier for his teammates, they eventually became impossible to ignore in their results. And even now, long after those early practices and playoff struggles have become part of league history, the memory that remains strongest is not just what he achieved, but how early he started behaving like someone who already understood where he was going, even when almost everyone else in the room was still trying to figure out how to keep up.
What do you think of when you watch Steph Curry?
I see a calmness about him. I see a calmness about him, and I think it's something that a lot of players don't understand. I think the fans, it's very hard for the fans to really understand what I'm saying, because most players don't get it. But there's a serious calmness about him, which is extremely deadly, right? Because he's not up, he's not down, he's not contemplating what just happened before or worrying about what's to come next. He's just there.
What makes those early memories linger is not simply the talent itself, but the way it kept evolving in real time, in front of people who thought they already understood what elite preparation looked like. Teammates would often describe how, even within a single season, Kobe did not feel like the same player they had seen a few months earlier, because the changes were not gradual in the usual sense. They were layered, almost like watching someone rebuild their own skill set while still playing inside the same game. By the time the Lakers began to stabilize into a more serious contender, the internal dynamic around him had already shifted. What started as a young player constantly pushing for isolation battles slowly transformed into something more structured, where that same aggression began to be channeled into defined roles within a system built to win. The important detail, according to veterans from that era, is that the competitive fire did not disappear. It simply learned how to operate inside a framework without losing its edge. There were moments in practice where that evolution became obvious. A possession that once would have ended in a forced shot attempt became an extra pass, but only after drawing two defenders. At the same time, the physical demands of those sessions never eased up. Even as his decision-making matured, the intensity of his preparation stayed at a level that made younger teammates uncomfortable just observing it. The gym habits became almost ritualistic, with repetition stacked on repetition until movements stopped looking like practice and started resembling instinct.
When you came to All-Star Weekend, who was that one guy or two or whatever that wasn't on your team, but you love to see him come All-Star Weekend?
I probably would say the one time I got a chance to play with Kobe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it was always a battle between me and him.
Coaches would often notice that what he struggled with in one game would appear as a refined solution just days later, as if the problem itself had been studied overnight and resolved through sheer volume of work. What made this even more striking was how naturally he began absorbing influence without ever losing identity. He would study veterans, borrow techniques, experiment with footwork patterns, and test them immediately under real defensive pressure. Yet none of it ever looked like imitation. It always returned to his own style, shaped by aggression, precision, and a refusal to slow the game down when he felt an advantage forming. For Nick Van Exel and others who witnessed that period up close, the most lasting impression is not a single highlight or moment of brilliance, but the consistency of that transformation. It was the understanding that the same mindset that created early tension in the locker room eventually became the foundation for championship execution. What once looked like impatience became urgency, and what once looked like individual obsession became collective advantage. And long after those early years faded into franchise history, The memory that stayed with those who shared the floor with him was simple in its clarity. He did not grow into greatness in a conventional way. He arrived with the belief of someone who had already seen it and spent every day proving that the belief was not misplaced, even when the rest of the room was still catching up to the speed at which he was building it.